Hi, it's good to be back here.
It really is. These conversations always feel like they need a moment to arrive.
Yeah, like you have to slow down before you can speak honestly.
Exactly. So let's take that moment and begin.
Change is one of those things we talk about as if it's simple. We say we want it. We imagine how much better things will feel when something shifts. And yet, when the opportunity for change actually appears, we hesitate. We stall. We feel tension instead of relief.
That contradiction can be confusing. How can we want something so deeply and still resist it at the same time? How can the very thing we believe will help us feel better also make us feel anxious, unsettled, or afraid?
I think part of the answer is that change doesn't just promise something new, it also threatens something familiar. Even when our current situation isn't fulfilling, it's known. It has shape. It has rules. And familiarity, even when uncomfortable, provides a sense of psychological safety.
So, when we think about changing, we're not just imagining improvement, we're also imagining loss. The loss of routine, the loss of identity, the loss of certainty, and that loss can feel heavier than the potential gain, especially when we don't know exactly what's waiting on the other side.
I think that's what makes change so uncomfortable. It asks us to let go before we receive, to step into uncertainty without guarantees, and our minds are wired to protect us from that kind of risk. We often believe fear means something is wrong, that it's a sign we shouldn't move forward. But sometimes fear is just the nervous system reacting to unfamiliar territory. Not danger, but difference.
Yes, and that's why wanting change doesn't automatically make it easier. Desire doesn't cancel fear. In fact, the more meaningful the change is, the more resistance it can create. Because meaningful change touches the parts of us that have learned to survive by staying the same. So instead of asking, "Why am I so afraid if this is what I want?" maybe the more honest question is, what is this change asking me to release?
And often, what we're being asked to release isn't just a situation, it's an identity. A version of ourselves that once made sense, that once felt safe, even if it no longer feels aligned.
That's why change rarely feels like excitement in the beginning. It feels like tension, like standing between two versions of yourself, unsure which one you're ready to let go of.
I think one of the most misunderstood things about change is that we assume we resist it because we're weak, indecisive, or unmotivated. We tell ourselves, if I really wanted this, I would just do it. Or, I must be failing because I can't take the leap. But the truth is far more nuanced, far more human. Resistance is not necessarily a flaw. In many ways, it is a form of protection, a mechanism our mind and body have developed over time to keep us safe. When we cling to what we know, when we hesitate to step into the unknown, it is often because our nervous system interprets unfamiliarity as potential danger, even when the change we seek is ultimately positive. Our attachment to the familiar is deeply ingrained. It doesn't exist because what we're holding on to is perfect, ideal, or even fully satisfying. Often, it's uncomfortable. Perhaps it drains us, frustrates us, or even limits us in ways we quietly recognize. And yet we cling to it because it is predictable. Predictability, in its own quiet way, is comforting. It provides structure, rhythm, and a sense of control over life's uncertainties. It allows us to anticipate outcomes, navigate relationships, and function in a world that often feels chaotic. Even when our familiar circumstances are imperfect or frustrating, they give our minds and bodies a kind of stability, a baseline that lets us breathe, even if only a little. This is why change can feel so uncomfortable, even when we want it. It threatens the patterns and routines that have quietly held us upright. It challenges the sense of competence we've built around knowing how to respond, react, and survive. And it asks us to step into a space where the rules are unclear, where the outcomes are uncertain, and where the safety we once relied on is no longer guaranteed. The discomfort is not a sign of weakness. It is the natural response of a system adapting to something unfamiliar. And in that tension, in that uneasy balance between desire and fear, there is an opportunity, a chance to grow, to stretch, and to discover parts of ourselves that we might not have known existed. In other words, resistance is not your enemy. It is a signal. It tells you where your boundaries have been, what has kept you safe, and where your mind and body are still adjusting. It reminds us that meaningful change is rarely instant or effortless. The familiar is comforting not because it is flawless, but because it has shaped us, defined us, and provided a foundation from which we can eventually take the next step, however slow, hesitant, or uneven that step might be.
Familiar situations teach us more than just routines. They teach us how to function in the world. They set the stage for our emotional responses, shaping the subtle rules we follow without even realizing it. We learn what is acceptable, what will provoke discomfort, and what will keep us in balance with the people and environments around us. We memorize patterns of behavior, anticipating reactions from others, and gauging how much of ourselves we can safely reveal. Even when these situations feel draining, repetitive, or unfulfilling, there is a hidden comfort in knowing the boundaries, knowing what to expect, knowing the rhythms, knowing the potential pitfalls. All of this creates a kind of invisible scaffolding that supports us when we feel fragile or uncertain. That knowing becomes grounding. It gives our minds a sense of orientation, a map we can rely on even when other parts of life feel unpredictable. Familiarity offers the illusion of control, or perhaps not even an illusion, but a quiet, steady reference point. We may not feel inspired or fully alive in these circumstances, but there is a subtle reassurance in the predictability. It tells our nervous system, this is safe. You've navigated this before. You know what to do. And that reassurance, even if it comes with compromise or quiet dissatisfaction, can feel essential. It keeps us from feeling untethered, from floating without anchors in a world that is often unpredictable and demanding. And yet, that very grounding can make change feel so impossible, because stepping away from the familiar doesn't just remove comfort, it removes the subtle supports we've learned to rely on. It asks us to navigate without a map, to face uncertainty head-on, and to find new ways of orienting ourselves. The stability that once felt mundane now reveals itself as precious, and letting go, even for something better, feels risky. We hesitate, we stall, we bargain with ourselves, sometimes indefinitely, for just a little more certainty before moving forward. And in that hesitation, we discover a paradox. Familiarity can feel both constraining and protective. It can limit our growth, yet it also sustains us. And understanding that duality is one of the first steps toward embracing change with patience, compassion, and awareness.
Change threatens that grounding in ways that can feel almost physical. It disrupts the reference points we've relied on for months, years, or even decades, those invisible markers that have given us a sense of stability and orientation in the world. Suddenly, the habits, routines, and patterns that once guided us no longer function in the same way. The strategies that helped us navigate relationships, responsibilities, and even our own moods seem insufficient. And that absence of certainty of a familiar map can feel overwhelming, leaving us unmoored in a space where we can't predict what comes next. It's important to notice that this sensation isn't a flaw or a weakness. Our attachment to stability is part of how the human mind protects itself. When the world feels unpredictable, our brains respond with tension, anxiety, or hesitation, a quiet alarm that reminds us to proceed cautiously. And so, resisting change is rarely about laziness or avoidance in a superficial sense. It is often about self-preservation, a way of holding on to the known in order to navigate life without losing balance completely. That's why staying the same isn't always about choosing comfort. In fact, the familiar may not feel comfortable at all. It may feel monotonous, draining, or even constraining. Yet, it carries a sense of orientation, a mental scaffolding that allows us to function without fear of the unknown. Choosing to remain in that space isn't always about seeking pleasure or ease, it's about avoiding the disorientation that comes with not knowing who you will be next. It's about preserving a sense of identity and competence, even if that identity is built around patterns that no longer fully serve us. And paradoxically, it is often this very tension, the push and pull between the safety of the familiar and the promise of growth, that creates the most profound opportunity for self-awareness. When we recognize that the discomfort of change is not a sign of failure, but a natural reaction to stepping beyond our reference points, we begin to approach it with curiosity rather than judgment. We start to see that the nervousness, the hesitation, and even the fear are markers, not obstacles, indicators of where transformation is taking place, quietly beneath the surface.
And what makes this even more complicated is that familiarity often becomes deeply intertwined with identity. It's not just that we get used to certain situations or patterns over time. Those situations begin to shape the very way we understand ourselves. Our routines, the roles we inhabit, the responsibilities we shoulder, and even the struggles we endure quietly become markers of who we are. They become part of the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. Think about it for a moment. The work you've done, the relationships you've maintained, the habits you've carried, they all contribute to a sense of self. When someone asks, "Who are you?" we often answer not with our feelings or values, but with the things we do, the roles we occupy, the experiences we've survived. Familiarity, in this sense, is more than comfort. It is identity. It is the lens through which we interpret our own lives. And that makes stepping into change feel threatening in a profound way. Because changing a situation isn't just about altering external circumstances, it's about redefining the internal map you've been using for years. Change asks you to question who you've been, what you've relied on, and sometimes even the very version of yourself that allowed you to survive until now. The routines that once offered stability may feel like anchors you need to cut, and the roles that once felt natural may suddenly seem like costumes you no longer want to wear. This is why resistance to change can feel so persistent. It's not just fear of the unknown, it's fear of losing a sense of self. Familiarity gives us identity, even when it limits us. Letting go of it, even willingly, can feel like stepping into a void. And yet, it is often in that void, in that uncomfortable space between who we were and who we are becoming, that true growth begins to take shape.
Maybe the most important thing to remember about change is that it doesn't ask you to be fearless. It asks you to be honest. Honest about what no longer fits. Honest about what feels heavy. Honest about what you've outgrown, even if you can't yet name what comes next.
So if change feels uncomfortable right now, that doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It doesn't mean you're unprepared or incapable. It often means you're standing at the edge of something meaningful, and your system is learning how to adjust.
There's a lot of pressure to move quickly, to decide, to be certain. But not all change needs urgency. Some transitions ask for patience more than action.
It's okay to take small steps, to pause, to reconsider, to move forward without having everything figured out. Change isn't a test you have to pass, it's a process you move through.
And maybe trust isn't about believing everything will turn out perfectly. Maybe it's about trusting that you can meet yourself honestly, no matter what unfolds. That you can listen, adjust, and respond with care.
You don't have to become a completely new person overnight. You don't have to erase who you've been. Change doesn't require rejection of the past, it asks for integration.
So if you're in a season where change feels heavy, let it be heavy. Let yourself feel the uncertainty without rushing to escape it. Growth often happens quietly, beneath the surface, long before anything looks different on the outside.
And maybe that's enough for now. To stay open, to stay gentle, to keep listening to yourself, even when the answers come slowly.
Thank you for being here with us, for taking the time to sit with these thoughts. We'll see you again soon.